I'm really excited about this next guest from Tennessee. Her name is Maryam Abolfazli, and she's running for Congress against Andy Ogles, a firebrand Trump supporter from the Nashville area. Now, Maryam is of particular interest to me for many reasons. First, she worked in Afghanistan in her early 20s, and we get into that in our conversation a little bit. But she's also a gun control advocate, she's a women's rights advocate, a writer, and so much more. Take a listen to our conversation. Maryam, thanks for joining us on the Postindustrial Podcast. I really appreciate it.
So happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, I told folks a little bit about you at the top, but give us a little bit more. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I am a native Tennessean, and I am the daughter of small business owners and immigrants, first-generation immigrants. I have a humongous family that I grew up with. I am a single mother of a 6-year-old boy. I have been working in the public service arena my whole life. I was very clear my senior year in high school that I wanted to work to bridge worlds. I wrote my college essay about that and quickly got into international relations and then did economic development because I'm a very practical, pragmatic person. So it's like, if we don't have water, if we don't have food, if we don't have a house, we're not doing okay. And so I think in those terms, how do we develop economically so that everyone does well or has a good foundation? And then I got a big break in kind of bridging those worlds by going to Afghanistan when I was 24 in 2003. And that was one of the most powerful years of my life. I worked to rebuild the irrigation infrastructure there, worked with World Bank, USAID, Asian Development Bank, all the big players to put together a big program for rebuilding the bombed out structures that prevented good, clean water and just access to water. Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
No. I was going to say that experience in Afghanistan must have been very formative because it was one for me as well. Talk a little bit more about being in Afghanistan as a 23-year-old, getting your first taste of that kind of work in the middle of a war. By the way, it was about year 2 of that time.
It was incredible. I landed and it looked like the moon. Nothing had been rebuilt. Nothing was fixed. There was shot down planes on the tarmac. It was dried out. It was dusty. The airport itself had holes in it, and there was lights were hanging from wires. It was incredible, and it was something I was just ready for. I was up for. We didn't have electricity most of the time. We didn't have internet most of the time. This is really in the beginning of all this, and I was chosen largely because of my language ability. The minister picked me out, and I went in there and I just hit the ground running. I built trust with him, and I built trust with the Afghans in the ministry, and slowly started rebuilding. The ministry was bombed out as well. Huge holes were in all the walls and stuff. And these are ginormous ministries because it's a very Soviet kind of a centralized system. So we went about just rehabilitating that. I mean, bare bones stuff. I mean, this is why I have so much respect for infrastructure, because you can't go anywhere if you don't have the basics. And that's why war always breaks my heart beyond sort of the awful death and violence and aggression it wreaks. But it's just the breaking down of buildings and roads and schools and things that you need to start anything. So we spent a lot of time on that. And then we spent a lot of time on training folks, giving dignity back to folks and having meaningful work to wake up to go to work. It is the pride of one of the big prides I take is just watching folks come into the ministry in the morning after 6 months of really building a program with their briefcases, really feeling hope and dignity again. And I think that's when I really appreciated the dignity of work, what it does to us psychologically to feel like we are valued, that we're contributing, that we have something to give, and there is some value in that. And then working in the international arena, understanding that play, that landscape. I had friends from all the embassies, and then again, understanding and respecting the military. I had friends in the military, I had friends in special forces. And then finally, the biggest thing I think that I take with me right now is a respect for firearms and a respect for war. My friends that were in the military, it was a good day when they could put their guns away and go out and have a meal, or, not be vigilant, not be on duty per se. And I feel like that's kind of been turned around completely today in our country. But it was very meaningful for me, and I loved every second of it.
Well, that experience obviously was very formative, but like I said, it was with me as well in terms of accomplishing things. There's no harder task than trying to accomplish something in a place like Afghanistan, and that will obviously test your resolve and build it as well. How has that experience shaped your experience that you're having now in running for office here in the United States, in Tennessee's 5th district against Andy Ogles? Obviously, the issues that you spoke of that you're passionate about, women's rights and firearms, are really big, are two big topics that we're facing in this and every election. How did those experiences inform your campaign right now?
I think, look, my campaign is really non-traditional. We have a gerrymandered district. It has rural, suburban, and urban all together. It's the second time we're having an election in this district, so not a lot of familiarity with the district, not a lot of familiarity with the maps and the precincts and all that stuff. We're all learning it, right? Nashville used to just have its own district. It did all the way back into the 1800s, and finally in 1950 it actually became just Davidson County. So it's been consistently blue. This is a very different landscape, and what it requires of me as the candidate is deep, deep listening and a desire to unify us with very different context, life experiences, perspectives. And how that's similar to Afghanistan is that this isn't easy. Like you said, right? This is not easy. It is so much easier I think, I've never done it before, but it seems like it would be so much easier to campaign in an echo chamber, to campaign in a place where everyone agrees. It's a lot harder to really find empathy and connection with such a vast, diverse group of folks, and folks that have been neglected honestly, by my party, and I'd say the other party, for at least a decade. I mean, the places I'm going, no one's knocked on their doors. No one's talked to them in a really long time. Very similar to Afghanistan, right? In
Right.
Afghanistan, I sat with warlords. They were ministers of departments. You had to have a level of tolerance and calm and an ability to withstand discomfort in conversations to be able to bridge a way forward. It was what it was, and you had to bridge a way forward. As much as we want to, dig in our heels and say, this is it wasn't going to work in Afghanistan, and it's not going to work in District 5. Now, you do have to have a spine about you. You do have to have a backbone and have, thick lines when things are wrong or harmful or hurtful. And I did with those warlords, and I will do with anybody here that's endangering my liberty or my freedom or my ability to be in anybody else's. But ultimately, it takes a lot of grit. It takes a lot of, you hit on this, waking up the next day and trying again. Waking up the next day and trying again. How many days in Afghanistan we lost electricity, we lost internet. I was literally driving around town just trying to deliver a message to someone. And some nights you go to bed and we went backwards 5 steps today. And you just got to wake up the next morning and try again. And that's what this campaign's about. And that's what, someone was asking me, how do we counter to the gerrymandering? You can go to the courts. We can hopefully pass some legislation on this, but ultimately the way we counter the gerrymandering is we bridge forward. We talk to each other. We listen to each other. I've learned a lot from people that have a very different background than me, that have a very different perspective from me. I have grown because of that. And that's hard work. That's just emotionally, psychologically, physically hard work. And it just takes that to bridge a way forward. And many of us in Afghanistan did that. And we were very proud of the eventual gains we made. I mean, it took years and years and years, but some really incredible things occurred there, like they will here.
Is it fair to say that your first foray into Tennessee politics had to do with the Covenant school shooting in recent years? You organized a protest right after that shooting to advocate for stricter gun laws in Tennessee, and then started the Rise and Shine organization to give people an opportunity at civic engagement on this issue and other issues. Talk a little bit more about those efforts and how they inform your campaign right now.
Well, I wouldn't say it was fair because I did work at the city level at the Metro Human Relations Commission. Now, that's not political work per se, but it's with the government. We're kind of the anti-discrimination commission. We were tasked after the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to really be that organization for the city. And then at the state level, I was working with an organization called Awake Tennessee. I was the chair of that organization, working on domestic violence and advocate confidentiality, but then jumping into women's repro freedom after the Dobbs decision fell, and we had a trigger ban. So then abortions were banned completely. So was in the legislature on those issues, and it was there that I really learned about how Tennessee politics and the state legislature works, because there were legislators that were saying, yeah, we're going to get this exception for rape victims. We're going to get this exception for kids. We're going to get this. And then the next day turning around and none of that passing, none of that being submitted or proposed. So I started to understand and attune my eye to these shackles that were kind of on us in getting anything done. And then the Covenant shooting happened, and the tragedy where 6 people were killed, administrators, a staff, and children. And 3 days later, I, along with Awake and neighbors and family and friends, and it very much crowdsourced through this rally, just tapping into the immense grief and anger that we were all feeling as a community. And then that started a movement whereby many organizations and many groups and many people that were not previously engaged, not in 2016 during the Women's March, not in 2020, but not in 2022, but after this, they became engaged. Many conservatives became very engaged. And I started Rise and Shine to kind of deal with the intersection of all these issues, because I had been watching that for a while. And we spent day after day after day. And I was talking about many parents, many moms, many aunts, uncles, grandmothers, teachers, everyone in the legislature, to keep an eye on what they were doing and to see if our requests were going to be heard. And they weren't. And that really led me to decide, look, if they're not hearing us, we need to be in positions of power where we can hear us. And so that's why I decided to run. This wasn't in the plan by any means, at least not now. I have a 6-year-old. I'm a single mother, but it's felt, and it does feel like now or never in a lot of ways.
Well, you do have a long resume of serving the public interest both in the U.S. and Afghanistan. However, I will push back and say that being a candidate is a lot different than being somebody who just serves the community in another capacity the way you described. What's 100%. That difference like now that you're at the top of a ticket and there's a lot more scrutiny on you, especially in a state like Tennessee, where a lot of Dems aren't finding fertile ground these days? What's it like?
There are books upon books that can be written about this. It's
Well, you're a
very
writer.
different.
I'm gonna give you more homework.
It's very, very different than being on the outside, being a nonprofit professional, being a COO, and then, what was known as an activist in the last year, as I was really advocating for gun safety, gun responsibility legislation. It's very different. I've representation, which I feel like has not been very popular concept as of late, particularly in my state. We have 500,000 plus voters in this district. Like I said, rural, suburban, urban. Representing that is very different than representing my beliefs and maybe a swath of people's beliefs, which was kind of what we were doing at Rise and Shine. We're advocating for, these gun responsibility, but really saying that you're going to represent a wide group, that you're democratically going to be elected and you're going to listen to constituents is very different. Now, I obviously have my values, I have my beliefs, I have my North Star and my integrity, but I also have to really have an eye for very differing positions, and it's tricky. And then there's the political process in and of itself, which I'm not a pro at. I don't know very well, but I definitely studied it from the outside. Being on the inside and looking at the compromises that are made, the negotiations that are made, the many different interests on one issue, it is a very quick learning curve, and it's a shock to the system in some ways, because in some ways I'm a purist. We all want to be black and white about an issue. Yes, no, it's got to include this. It's not, but on this side of it, there's nothing black and white. There are so many things to consider when trying to put something forward. And there's going across the aisle to even get it moving. And those compromises would probably disappoint someone on the outside, myself a year ago on the outside, saying, that's not clean enough. That's not pure enough. We want it just like this, that's been a learning curve for sure.
Tennessee politics is really interesting to me because if you look back 3 decades ago, we had a vice president who was a Democrat from Tennessee, who was a tree hugging and continues to be a tree hugging environmentalist in Al Gore. And most recently, the last U.S. senator who was a Democrat to serve from Tennessee died. I can't remember the guy's name. He was 87 years old. We couldn't even conceive of there being a Democratic senator from the state of Tennessee, which was once dubbed and still continues to have the moniker of being called the New South. Explain that to folks and to me as well. I can't get my head around what happened. I mean, I know what happened over the last 30 years, but you could speak to it being a native Tennessean. How has politics changed in Tennessee since the days when you could be a Democrat and get elected to a higher office in Tennessee?
Well, I'm going to first come out and say, don't sleep on us. Don't sleep on us, because you could see on November 5th some interesting things happening. Obviously, I'm not running just to run. I'm running to win. And so there's something powerful happening right now. And that's Tennessee. Tennessee had, remember, Tennessee was the last vote in the suffrage movement for women. Tennessee introduced seatbelt laws first. Tennessee has and will be sometimes on the cutting edge. I think we're on the cutting edge right now of fighting fascism and the anti-democratic movement. We understand where the openings are and where they are not. We have been, I think Justin Jones says we've been in Project 2024. I would say even 2023, while everybody else is looking at it intellectually. So, those of us that are advocating, working hard here, are on the edge of this. And so what happened? I mean, it was started to, the legislature was blue, the governorship was blue, the Congress was blue, and it started to turn around 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009. You could blame all kinds of things. You could blame racism when Obama became president. You can blame just shifting demographics, shifting socioeconomic situations, losing the loss of jobs, the loss of economic standing, a dozen things. What we could also say is the Republican Party created a message that was compelling to folks here. And maybe the Democratic Party started to ignore folks. When I talk about gerrymandering and going out into these districts, I can tell that a Democrat hasn't effectively been able to communicate with these folks in a very, very long time. And just aren't even coming from a place of equal understanding. And so if we have decided as a party that not even worth it, then it's not even going to be worth it. Then it's going to go the direction it goes. This is hard work. It's hard work connecting and understanding what folks are needing and how they're speaking about a thing. And if you decide that that's not worth it, and we're going to focus on swing states or whatever, then that's what you're going to get. But I believe the people here now running believe Tennessee is worth it. I love it here. I was raised here. I came down here to raise my son here. I do love it here, and I consider myself a Tennessean. Last night we had a town hall in the district, in what's considered a very red part of the district. And a man came and he said, I'm a boot wearer, I'm a gun owner, I'm a progressive, and my oldest kid is trans, and I'm a Tennessean, born and raised. So to me, no one gets to own who a Tennessean is. No one gets to name that and make it some poster child. We're all Tennessean. And that's what we're trying to convey and bring back. And so maybe even the Democrats of the past fit one prototype. Even many of them were white males of a certain background or whatever. And we're trying to say, maybe it's way more complicated than that. Maybe it's way more nuanced than that. When I was talking to a small cattle farmer last week, lovely human being, really felt connected to this person. He doesn't even fit our stereotypes of what he should be. So I just think this stereotyping, this prototyping, it makes life black and white and makes everybody kind of feel they belong somewhere. But when you dig under, when you scratch under the surface, nobody is exactly those things. And we've got to learn how to talk to each other so we allow people to be more than those stereotypes. And obviously it comes back to, are we solving people's problems? Did we stop solving people's problems? Did we stop looking? Was there a gap that occurred where whatever the Democratic leadership was dealing with and whatever the people were dealing with was different? And did that also exacerbate the problem? Whatever it was, whatever happened, I know that outside people don't believe Tennessee has any chance. Those of us in here are seeing something very different. It's actually quite inspiring to see. I have phone banking every Thursday and door knocking every Sunday. And I'd say, 90% of people that show up from age 15 to 70 have never done any of those things before and have lived here for decades. So there is something happening here that's not reflective of what was in the past.
How is it then that your opponent, Andy Ogles, who is a firebrand Trump supporter, election denier, anti-abortion, anti-gay marriage advocate, can find his constituents in this district of Tennessee that is diverse, the one that you're reaching out to? How has he managed to get a foothold there, in your opinion?
Well, because I guess the party has fashioned itself to be a family values, fashioned itself to be kind of the underdog, fighting the state, fighting the bullies, fighting, the elitists, the truth talking party, the simple term talking party, the anti-elitist party. I think then many people have decided that they are Republican. And so if you have an R next to your name, you're going to get those votes. And then he is really good at using some of the party's tactics of fear mongering and anxiety production. So they're coming for you. They're coming for you. How many 10, 30, 40 ways can we say they're coming for you? And every single time we say it, how much can we raise in money and how many votes can we get? It's just a tactic. It's shown, the studies show it's a great tactic to get you to act if your anxiety is spiked. If I inspire you, if I get you hope, that also gets you to act. But it's a very different process and it's a very different response. So he's really good at getting that anxiety going. He's really good at telling you the world is coming to an end and they're coming for you. And I think that appeals to a certain base. But let's talk about what those numbers are. We had a primary in August. He had a challenger, a formidable challenger. She was an excellent challenger. She raised about $1 million, and the results were he got 32,000 votes, she got 24,000 votes, and I got 30,000 votes. So he got 37% of the total vote. That seems about right to me. I think it's about 30% that are, kind of extreme and love that rhetoric and, we've got to protect ours type of stuff. And I think the rest are kind of trying to find a home.
That home that you provide, does that take into account that it seems, tell me in your district, that most folks across America are like there to be some right to abortion access. And what are you hearing from your constituents on this issue?
I think there's two things that are major movers in terms of what people are going to privately do in the ballot box. One is women being safe while being pregnant. It is right now in Tennessee, we have a 20% drop in OBGYN residency applications. We're a major healthcare, by the way, we're a major healthcare hub. That's the number one industry in my district. We have several colleges and hospital systems here. HCA is built here, major industry. So the fact that we have a 20% drop in OBGYN applications in residency tells you what is going on. And that means, residences bring doctors. Those are the people that turn into the future doctors. So the future is grim. On top of that, we have doctors that are practicing. One is even running for office because she's so frustrated at the state level, that bring on criminal lawyers, that run 2 or 3 more ultrasounds they ever would have before because they're so terrified of being liable for something that is so murky and gray, that women have to carry basically dead fetuses, wait for them to miscarry in this state, or spend the money, find the solution, get the hotel room and go somewhere else to get that treatment. Can you imagine walking around Target with like a pregnant belly, knowing, it's a kind of torture. And those are kind of the best case scenarios. I'm not even talking about the ones where things are immediate and have to be dealt with emergency and the doctor's trying to determine, am I going to get in trouble for this or not? Because we have this life of the mother exception. And then that's not even talking about the kids that have to have their babies, the people that are victims of rape, et cetera. So people are watching this. Women are watching this. We had a Vanderbilt poll that came out a few months ago that said there's a 20-point difference between men and women on these issues. And everyone has moved more left on choice in general after this trigger ban came into effect. So I believe and I understand that in the ballot box, we're going to see something there. That one's talked about less publicly because I think socially, in some parts of the district, it's unclear whether you can really express those opinions. The gun, what were you going to say? Something? No, the gun responsibility, however, is pretty publicly expressed. It doesn't matter what your label is, what your party label is. Most people are pretty worried about their kids in school, in movie theaters, in parks, whatnot, because we just haven't passed anything to make anybody safer. In fact, we passed to arm teachers, which all the data shows more guns around, more casualties, more accidents. So that I think is the one that's really just causing anxiety for folks. I know every morning I kind of drop my kid off and squeeze him a little too tight every morning just because, nothing's changed. So those two are really big ones.
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today, Maryam. You opened my eyes a great deal about what's going on in your district, and I wish you the best of luck in your election. After you win, will you come back on and talk to us about it?
100%. Thank you so much, Carmen. I appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep. For sure.
I want to thank Maryam for being on the Postindustrial Podcast, and I want to thank you for checking in as well. After you're done here, go to postindustrial.com and be sure to sign up for our free newsletter. Thanks.